So please allow me to introduce them. The first one is Ms. Katya Petrikevich. She is the member of the Public Participatory Budgeting Committee of the People Power, and she is also a part of the Civic Tech Review Committee. She also supported the research of the current trend in tech for European Union Commission, and she has been training a lot of young Western African leaders at Tech Camp in Abidjan. And she will introduce us the digital platform guide and rating metric of the People Power, which is the project that she has been contributing tremendously. It's very nice to have you here, Katya. Hello. And the second one, hello. And our second guest is Mrs. Hao-Ting Chang. She is the design lead of the Public Digital Innovation Space, the PDIS. The PDIS is one of Taiwan's government sectors led by Digital Minister Audrey Tang. The PDIS has been helping the government to adopt digital tools and innovative ways to enhance the decision-making process and people's participation. And Mr. Chang is very, very experienced in redesigning the government's decision-making process and make it able to solve complex problems by using user-centric design thinking and research skills. Her work focused on participatory design, civic participation in open government, and youth participation. She believed that through participation, people and the government can understand each other's experience and its difficulty, and thus making the creations and making of public service a bottom-up one, and also make the government and the people to co-create and co-design the public service. So it's our pleasure to have you here, Hao-Ting.
Hello, thank you, Ya-wei.
Welcome. And finally, before the cafe starts, please brief you how we're gonna proceed with the cafe today. Firstly, each guest will take turns to share their experience for 15 minutes. And following that, I will have a discussion with the two guests. And finally, we will have 20 to 25 minutes for the audience to raise their questions. So now let's invite Mrs. Katya Petrikevich to share her experience. The floor is yours, Katya.
Thank you so much, Ya-wei, for the kind introduction, and thank you for generally having me here. It's really exciting to share with you my experience, but also to learn from you. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of new things that I'm going to learn. So today I'm going to talk about guide and ratings for digital participation platforms, when to use them, how to choose them, and what are the tips for maximum results. As I was already introduced, I'm a member of People Powered organization that is a global network of academics, of researchers, practitioners, and decision makers that are working on improving public participation. And I'm also a co-founder and international director of Participation Factory. It's a Czech-based social enterprise that is working internationally on pretty much doing the same thing, but also doing capacity building and civic tech advising. And before we start, I just want to have a very simple warm-up activity to kind of like let us in the mood for starting to think about civic tech and digital participation. So if you have some specific idea on what challenges you faced when engaging people online, please share your answers in the chat. I think that would be great for all of us to see and just relate to each other and understand what the issues are, but also this is something that we'll try to respond to at a Q&A session part of the cafe. So let's talk about digital participation platforms. Why do they matter, and why do we need to even talk about them? As Ya-wei already said, a large number of digital participation platforms have emerged in the past decade or two even, but the real spike in the use of digital participation and digital tools was provoked by the COVID-19, because as you can imagine, we had a lot of information that we need to share, a lot of data that we need to gather from the communities, but also we needed to do it online and not in person due to the restriction that we had. Hence, the civic tech and digital participation became a much more relevant topic. And in general, digital participation is there to support governments and civil society groups to engage more people in all types and stages of participatory process. And it has plenty of benefits, anything from better informed decision-making based on data that you collect from citizens, to enhancing trust in public institutions and increasing inclusion and equity through inviting people who might not participate into in-person meetings. And so why do we need a guide for digital participation platforms? There are so many, I can do it myself. That's a great question. And from the experience that I have and my colleagues have, we know that international group of practitioners, that people are looking for guidance and support as they continue to explore how digital can enable more participatory and deliberative democracy. The issue is that there are so many choices and so many options that it can be really overwhelming, and that's why the quality of online participation can vary widely. We also have a look, and personally I saw it myself, that there is very difficult to find accessible, relevant, and practical guidance for how to select and use online participation tools. And for decision makers, it's really hard to figure out whether the great things you hear in a digital tool sales pitch will really translate into action. So together with People Powered members, we decided to create a resource and a guide that would work in different global contexts. And it aims to help people understand how to review different tools, the questions you need to ask yourself, and it also provides tips on how to get started. And hopefully it will enable more people to actually do digital participation. So the guide is literally for anyone who's looking to connect people to power in their community, but more specifically, we were designing it thinking about local governments, civil society groups that work with people, and civic tech companies, so they can understand what are the actual real needs and what's the competition that's out there on the market. So let's talk about highlights from the guide. As I said, the guide talks very broadly about what civic tech is, what kind of processes it can benefit, but it also provides some useful information. And I just want to share a few things that we already mentioned. First of them is that one of the biggest challenges that people usually face is ensuring that the platform is accessible to users. For example, due to connectivity requirements, the cost of internet and electricity, there are some additional barriers to participation on digital platforms. That's why it's really important to always test the platform on the slower connection and trying to see, trying to see the demo to make sure that people can connect to the platform regardless of the internet connectivity. So as you can see, the connectivity issue is very relevant, and also one of the things that's not noted on the slides, but that I always like to highlight, is that it's really important to ensure that it's not only digital process, but it's a hybrid process, so that people can also participate in person if they choose to, and if they don't have access to internet. The other issue that was already mentioned before in the introduction is data protection and cybersecurity. So whenever you think about choosing a platform and running a digital participation process, it's important to think, how do you protect your process from cyber attacks? A few very simple tips are minimizing the amount of data you actually ask from people. This way you minimize the amount of data that can potentially be at risk. Some data is not essential for your process, and therefore you can leave it aside because it's just a risky business to collect all of this data. The other thing is using magic links for users' authentication rather than storing passwords. And finally, not forgetting to automatic frequent backups and setting up a convenient delivery network. And finally, this is a very counterintuitive disclaimer. It's a very counterintuitive message. We're talking about digital participation. Again, I like to bring it up every time we talk about it, is that you might not need dedicated digital participation platform, even if you want to do digital participation, or if you want to do participation. The platforms we discuss in this guide can be useful, and they can invite new participants and make administration easier, but there are plenty of examples and cases of institutions and organizations doing more with less, and sticking to traditional social media, for example, for the purposes of communication without having to access a new tool. And so now that we talked broadly about the guide, I would like to talk about the ratings. So the resources compiled by the People Powered consist of the guide that talks about digital participation and gives some guidance on how to structure it, and the ratings, which give an assessment of the participatory tools. The ratings were developed through publicly available information. We looked into what information is provided on platform websites and complemented by information connected through other online websites and resources. There were some survey and interviews, and also committee members relied on their personal experience of using these different tools. Our committee was quite diverse and covered quite a lot of languages. Therefore, most of the platforms, or many of the platforms that were covered there, were used by our committee at some point, and we contributed our experience as well. But it's important to highlight it from the very beginning that the ratings are not an evaluation based on full user testing. We're not saying also that certain civic tech platforms are always better than others. It's always based on the situation. Our ratings just provide you with information to find the platform that suits your specific needs, but you first of all need to understand what exactly you need and what your community is looking for. And also, another point to mention is that the focus was on the most widely used platforms that have been used in the most common global languages, which of course excludes some of the platforms and make less widespread languages not present there, but that's something you should be wary of. And finally, the platforms that we worked on were mostly focused on comprehensive digital tools. The resource focuses on platforms that are designed specifically to support full participation programs rather than just one-time process or one-time thing. But still, you will see in the ratings, and you see on the screen on the right, the screenshots of the ratings, you'll see they split into 3 different categories: complex, simple, and specialty. The complex platforms, they work well for complex processes and have multiple features that can be used in one process, while simple platforms, they focus on one type of participation, for example, discussion, voting, questionnaire, or mapping. And we also have a third section of platforms that's called specialty. And those are platforms that are really excellent that we know of, but they operate in a specific smaller language, for example, Ukrainian or Czech, or they focus on one specific type of process like participatory budgeting. And you're already seeing from the screenshots that there are 6 most important criteria that we evaluated. And I'd like to note that the criteria that we chose was chosen from a perspective of the person who is going to be administrating or purchasing and then managing the platform, because that's at the end of the day a rating for someone who is going to choose it and implement it and then invite people to participate. So the criteria include cost and capacity requirements, the features that the platform has, the accessibility that it can provide, as well as ethics and transparency that is included in the packaging, and also track record and reliability so that we know that the platform has been tested already. And here is the screenshot or a more detailed representation of what the ratings look like. So on the left, you see platforms, and then on the top right, you see the different criteria, and below that, you see the breakdown evaluation of it. So let's look into those criteria. The first one is cost, and it assumes the price for local government that requires some customization of the tool. And there are tools that can be free, ranging from free to anything that is more than $20,000 per year. Obviously, that's a very important criteria. There are certain limitations on budget, and that's good to see it right away and not figure it out midway when you're almost done with setting up the process, and then you realize that the tool is too expensive for you. Another thing that's connected to cost is capacity requirements. And it's very important to also understand what you need to manage the platform and to set up the platform. So we looked into what tech expertise required for the configuration, what's the hosting capacity required, and whether there is tech support that is available from the side of the civic tech provider. And when it comes to features, we just collected the most commonly used ones. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a list of the most common ones. And it covers anything from idea collection and discussion to sentiment analysis and heat mapping or general mapping, proposal drafting, voting, survey, you name it. And of course, there is also a feature that is connected to user verification and security, but it's specifically about what level of user verification features there is. There is, as I said, a separate category for ethics and other things. When it comes to accessibility, it's a little bit of a more complex criteria. We looked into what number of the countries where the platform has been used, because it's an indicator of how many languages, but also how many contexts it has been operating in. Also, internet accessibility might range in different countries. Also, we looked into whether hybrid integration with in-person activities is valuable and whether there is browser technology requirements from users, because that can create an extra barrier for those who don't have digital literacy skills. And finally, we looked into whether it's mobile friendly and what the connectivity requirements are. And finally, as I said, there are two very important categories. One of them, track record and reliability, just to see whether the platform has been tested long enough and how many users there were. But also there's a separate category for ethics and transparency, where we look into whether the platform is open source and what kind of data protection and content moderation is featured on this platform. So a lot of people ask what is the most important criteria, and I would say none of them is the most important. And it really depends on what you need and what kind of limitations you might have. Maybe you have cost limitation or human resource limitation, or maybe you have very specific features in mind. The score for each criterion was standardized to a scale of 1 to 100, giving each of those criteria an equal weight. And then the overall score is the average of those 6 scores. And also please note that there are not available that is counts as a 0, because we also want to give kind of a special nod to the transparency of the information that the platforms highlight. So if you see here in this slide, the yellow score is the average score of all 6 criteria, so that you can see how the platform measures. And then, for example, in the costs, you will see some of not available. As I said, not available is just giving a 0 score for a whole category, because we do want to make platforms a bit more transparent in their communication. So we want to encourage them to share it. And finally, let's talk about how these ratings can help you. Well, first of all, very obviously, they can help you cut the cost of implementing digital platforms, because you'll be spending less time on the research. And you'll also understand better your options when it comes to the price range, because oftentimes you get locked into an idea of that is a specific price, nothing below it exists. But if you have this overview, you can actually realize there are cheaper or maybe more expensive options that you can afford to buy. And it also works with hidden costs. They're oftentimes not communicated to the decision makers who are working with digital platforms. For example, capacity and resources that you need to manage the platform. Sometimes it is an unpleasant surprise. It requires extra money, extra time, and makes the process more expensive and more stressful. And we're trying to uncover it by showing you what requirements there are. And finally, it can help you to enhance your participation process through understanding of what is even possible. First of all, you see a full list of functionalities, and out of a sudden you realize that there is much more that is available and that you can do with digital participation that you ever imagined. And so you're encouraged to experiment a little bit more. Second of all, it has this aspect of providing best practices in accessibility, data privacy, and ethics. And maybe it's not a conversation in your context or in your country at the moment, but because you see it in the ratings, you start to strive for it and you actually try to adopt it. And finally, it helps you to learn about solutions and processes with a different focus. For example, PB specific and from different regions. So it enhances the learning from each other, from other processes, from other case studies. So that was a very brief overview of the digital guide and ratings. I'll be happy to answer any of the additional questions that you might have. But I'll give the floor back to Ya-wei. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Katya. It's a wonderful presentation. The contents of the platform guide and ratings are actually very, very rich and abundant, and appreciate that Katya can use such a short time to introduce all the important points. And I really appreciate that this platform, the guide really wants to meet the people's demands, and instead of like forcing people to adopt digital tools. And I think this is a really a brilliant job. So thank you, Katya. And now we're going to invite Hao-Ting to share her experience in the PDIS. So Hao-Ting will share her wonderful experience because just like we mentioned in the introduction, there are much homework that we have to do before we adopt any digital tools, no matter in the government or community. There are very much important efforts to be made, such as culture, the change of culture and structure. These efforts are often invisible, but they are really important. So I think that's why Hao-Ting's presentation is definitely very, very important. So now the floor is yours, Hao-Ting.
Thank you, Ya-wei, and thanks, Kaya, for this amazing presentation. And thanks, everyone, for joining our session today. I guess I will be sharing what's happening after you use a digital platform and then you collect some of the ideas and how you can collaboratively working with the government officials and all the stakeholders to co-create together. I'll be sharing these kind of experiences in the central government, what we do after collecting those ideas. And this is our e-petition platform. It's called Join. And it started from 2015. We have, for so far, 33 million visits already. And it's around 14,000 ideas are born and discussed in this platform. And I'm very curious to see if our platform has used this rating tool that Kaya has introduced. That I will be probably having some discussions with the managers to manage this platform to make it better. But then today we're not talking about the platform interfaces itself here. We're talking about how we handle after these ideas are born, how we handle these processes to co-create with the citizens together. And to give you some ideas on how, what are the ideas are generated from this platform. So for example, this one is a petition that is talking about making a better electronic toll collection system. And then there are also some ideas about creating a friendly environment for pets to travel in Taiwan Railway. And of course, there are topics that reflects conflicts or different value, like this one, terminates the pig weight competitions for religious ceremonies. For many of the topics like this one, it's actually a topic that relates to different ministries and organizations in the government. And to solve topics that are across ministries, and even for people in the central government that can share experiences or even to collaborate across ministries or organizations. That we actually design a mechanism called Participation Officer Network back in 2017. We asked each ministry to send 2 or 3 civil servants as the representatives. gathering at least once every month together with PDs, discussing how to handle the topics from the e-petition platform or to bring ideas that they want to collaborate across ministries. And this participation officer network has been running for more than 4 years. And now we have around 65 participation officers. And this is the team. And PO is a short for participation officer. And they are a very important part of the team. It's when they understand the value of open government or will spread, like ripple effects that influence much more and grounded in the government. And then for the participation officers, we've actually created different tools and training courses of all kinds. But more importantly, we believe learning from doing. So we design opportunities for them. For example, we ask participation officers to be the host in the group discussion in policy design collaborative workshops that we have twice every month. By being a host, they need to learn to be a great listener, encourage people to express their needs or challenges, and try to find a common ground in the discussion. And another thing that we bring to this mechanism is also that we bring topics from the joint platform, it's the e-petition platform that I just introduced, to our PO network. So we actually design a process for the participation officers and ministries to discuss the topic together with the stakeholders. And this is what we call collaborative meetings. It's a design thinking inspired workshop that helps to learn from the diverse perspectives and look for alignments. So with a strong team and a process, we started our journey to collaborative policy or public service making process. And my later time is going to introduce a case, one collaborative meetings. Let's see how we use collaborative meetings to find alignments and encourage partnerships. And I will be introducing the process of redesigning an online service for hiking permits. And to just give you some context of this project, it's because in Taiwan, we have more than 200 mountains. There are over 3,000 meters, but managed by many different departments. So thinking about if you wanted to go for a hiking route that is over 3,000 meters, that you probably have to first look for this route is managed by which departments, and then you look for the certain interfaces to apply for that permit. And this is what the original services look like. It looks really government-centric with very unfriendly interfaces with many highlights and with so much information, but then you don't know where to be focused on. And not to mention that if you wanted to apply for one route, you might need to apply for different services, fill in different informations twice or 3 times. And this is the outcome within 3 months after our collaborative meetings, a clean, simple, and friendly integrated digital service. And you can find all the hikes in one platform, in this platform. And with one application, you can get your hiking permit. And then during these 3 months that we actually designed this process that involved many participations from people who care about the subjects, from the government and the citizens. And I will be introducing 3 different milestones in this within these 3 months. And the first one is the digital dialogue policy. So at the very starting, early in the process, we still wanted to hear more to understand the real needs from using these digital platforms. And Polis is the tool which helps us to listen with scale. So let me introduce, Polis is actually a digital tool where you can collect the comments from people. And then more importantly, you can actually agree or disagree other statements. So let me introduce this interface a little bit. You can firstly, probably if you have some ideas around this topic, you can share your perspective on top of it and press submit. And then you can also see others' statements or comments, and then you can agree and disagree. And of course, after a while collecting all the statements from people, Paulus has an algorithm to group and prioritize the statements. And in this project, when we actually got 800 people voted, and then we got 12,000 votes casted, and then we have collected 121 statements in this process. In this way, we not only collect the statements, but then also we understand what are the statements that people cares about. So then, for example, one comments that we got in this platform, apologize for this, I didn't translate it into English because I thought it would be more real when you see this, the real outcome. But then it says that, so the application should simplify into one platform. You can only you only need to fill in once your information, and the system will automatically run all the applications for you. So this is the prioritized needs. So then when you see on the red dot, the dot is very small, but it's on the left-hand side of the screen. You see most of the people agree on the statements, and then you can see this is the priorities that we can focus on, because that's what most people need. And then after making sure that some of the directions, and we held a collaborative meetings to invite all the stakeholders to co-create with us. Like in most collaborative meetings that we actually use mind map to collect and analyze users' needs. And then we use live broadcasting and Slido to encourage more participations. And then these are the real image from the collaborative meetings, where we have the on-site meetings, but then also we broadcast our meetings online so that more participants can join. And then also, if online participants have questions, they can use Slido to leave their messages, and then we will be replying, or we will invite the government officials to reply their questions. And in the collaborative meetings, we invite different stakeholders to join the discussions. Like in this picture, then you can see hikers, rescuers, travel agents, and the government officials. Together with our host, it's the participation officer that I introduced earlier. That forms a smart team to discuss the service in detail, that makes sure that all different needs are considered into the solution. And by meeting everyone in person, it helps building trust and empathy. When having certain degree of trust, it's always easier to build the consensus and find directions that fits most. In the right-hand side, we see our participation officer, and he's from the Ministry of Transportation, leading the co-creation discussions together with the stakeholders, brainstorming ideas and sketching possible solutions. And once we've narrowed down what we are going to do, we start our implementation process. And in this project, it's a little more special because in our office every year, we invite young designers to redesign the government digital service. And the year before, there were a group of talented designers. You see those three on the left-hand corner. Working on the redesigning of the hiking permit system. So before we actually did this project, that these three designers, they saw this the needs from the hikers, and then they redesigned it a year before a system, a prototyping system. And then when we hear that we're going to make this system happen, we immediately invite them into our process to co-create with us. Implementation process, we also build digital prototypes and invite different users. Some of them joined our collaborative meetings before, and to test out and share their experiences to make the service better. And another thing that I wanted to make sure that it's very important in the implementation is the open API. And like Ya-wei mentioned, I'm actually not the expert of open API either, but as to my understanding, it's like a common language that's used in the software world that allows connections and communication. So if anyone has a better idea on how this service would work, they can always use Open API and design a better version. And by opening up API, we also unlock the possibility of this digital service. So these open API can be widely applied to maybe something that they are very useful during hiking, for example, like navigation system or rescue system, or even something that we never thought about. And we don't have to limit ourselves with the limited resources that we have in the government. With Open API, anyone can be a service provider, just like like another example that's in our office. It's the mass map. So if I have time, maybe I can introduce it later or next time. What has been a wow in this project? It's actually not about the tools that we are using or what kind of advanced technology that we are using. It's the reaction from the people that join into this process to co-create and to participate with us. So at the very beginning, when we see this service is launched, and then we see a lot of blames, and then people are complaining about why the government services is so hard to use or not user friendly. But then after this participation process, then you can see actually from blame that they understands that they can contribute, they can give feedbacks, that we can see those comments are changed from blame to feedback. When people understand that this would be an evolving platform, that their words would be something that can improve the service, people don't want to be the hater. Instead, they give feedbacks and suggestions. And like in this slides, there is a non-hiker sharing the information and tell everybody to help test out and leave feedback. And in the process of this co-creation, our friend here who likes hiking very much, and then he's also an opinion leader in the social media, and he's very much involved in this process. He has been to the collaborative meetings, and then he's also helping us to test out the prototypes, and he's super proud to be part of it. And then he's sharing this information to his network. And when the platform came online, he's taking the credibility at the same time, part of the responsibilities as well. Just like nurturing a baby together with us, he's feeling proud and also responsible for it. So that's why when we're talking about participation process, we're not talking about because we are collaborating with people, not only the government officials, but then also the stakeholders. And then we do care about what's their needs, and then what's their feedbacks, and then what's their comments, and then we wanted to build into it. And then this is something that over this 100 collaborative meetings and all the different collaborations that we do in the office, that we find out that once you understand the needs, you started from the needs, and then you find a way to look for alignments, and you build partnerships together with the stakeholders, with the citizens and the civil servants. Then this is a process where you can successfully make a participation or make a policy making process better. And this is my brief presentation about what we do in Taiwan. And later on, I'll give time back to Ya-wei, and then we can answer questions together with Katya. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hao-Ting. That is a wonderful presentation that we could see that although we saw that the PDIS used the digital tool, many kinds of digital tools, but we can see a decision making and public service was made in a hybrid form. And by doing so, the trust and mutual trust was built between all the people involved. And I think that's the key to make this case a successful one. And thank you very much for pointing this out. So, well, thank you for all your presentations. So now I'm going to lead the audience to dive deeper to your ideas and experience. So I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm looking forward to have the feedback from you. So I have questions firstly to Katya. So you have led the formation of the People Powers, the digital platform guide, and we are happy to see that you mentioned some indicators to evaluate a digital tool, and one of them is to show whether the tool is open source or not. So I believe this term is very strange to many people in the world, including me. So could you please use a very simple language to describe what does it mean and how it will help us to make the government service more transparent and make the public service more accessible to the people?
Thank you so much for the question. That's really a great one. Even in, for example, Czech Republic, that's still a conversation that is to be had, and a lot of people don't know what open source is. So generally speaking, open source is a software where the source code, or basically how it works, can be inspected, modified, and enhanced pretty much by everybody. And the source code, as I said, is the part of the software that most computer users don't ever see. It's basically the code that programmers use to manipulate, to change how the piece of application works, how the platform works. So in essence, open source can affect the way people use, study, modify, distribute software. And by design, open source promotes transparency and collaboration and sharing, because they permit other people to see the source code, make modifications, incorporate changes. And they also encourage users to access, view, and modify the software whenever they like. And also it helps them to understand how their data is being used and how the whole system works, to make sure that it's transparent. So again, just to quickly sum up, the main benefits are transparency of the processes, transparency of data management. It's also availability, because pretty much everyone can use the open source. It's also more sustainable, because then open source software is continuously passed on and it's independent of the manufacturer. It can continue living and developing beyond that. And finally, security. Imagine how many people many people are working on it. So they are improving the security step by step. And also because of the transparency, the security is also higher, because you understand clearly how the open software works. Maybe just a quick side note that open software, I would just be cautious and mention that it's not free, in the sense that you still need human resources to actually implement it. So it still has this cost of capacity that is required. But otherwise, I hope that was a brief introduction to open source that helped you understand what it is.
Thank you very much, Katya, for making this term that sounds very technical, but now it would be kind of like easy to understand what that is exactly and what's the benefit it can bring. So following Katya's reply, we had the basic idea of knowing open source can enhance the transparency and accessibility of digital service in the government. So, so following that, I would like to ask a question to Hao-Ting. So we all know that for everyone, including the public servants in the government, when they are asked to use a digital tool that they never know, which is very strange to them, and they didn't even know, may not know what the name is until the day that they receive it, regardless the source code of the tool. So I think, could you please share with us like what is the correct mindset or strategy for people working in the government when you're going to introduce a digital tool or a new method for them? What kind of mindset we should have to encourage them to try it or help them to understand it and apply it?
Sure. So when we're introducing a new mindset or even methodologies or the digital tool, we will always ask ourselves first, what's the advantage for them to use this tool or to use this methodology? So we will not force them to use a new thing. So if they can find out a way that can achieve the same goal, they can use actually their own tools as well. So we don't force them, but then we show them the advantages of using this tool. And then I remember a little story that once one of our PO participation officers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, she shared with us that she used design thinking and mind map that we use in the collaborative meetings to manage her superiors, to work together with her colleagues as well, because she thinks it's very useful in her daily work. So this is a great example to let them find out what's good for them and then to apply in their daily work. But then to introduce a new type of tool or methodologies, of course, showing the advantage is the first step, but then you need to understand their behaviors and their culture as well, because working in the biggest organization probably also I wouldn't say the oldest organization, but at least it's a very complex system with complex culture. It's not like a small company, so they have a lot of cultural burden or some of the cultures that it's not the same with what we experience. So then, of course, understanding their behaviors, their needs, and then to understand their cultures is very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Hao-Ting Chang. I think these are the things that we have to keep in mind if we have the chance to suggesting that the government, how should the government to include digital service and to enhance the application of digital service. Yeah. So now I have following that, I have a question to Katya. So let's pretend that so now in the government, a great healthy culture and the structure, even in such a great environment, there's still chances that the good projects, good proposal cannot be sustained in the government. I believe that you are very familiar with the community of civic tech, and there are many great tools and great projects of digital democracy, but in the end, they cannot be continuously used in the government. So can you please share with us what are the reasons behind and what we can do to prevent the same questions from happening?
So, sure. One of the biggest problems is that the digital participation, same as the participation, is oftentimes very connected to the political will. So it's connected to one specific government, and then if the government changes, then the next person in charge might say, oh, well, I don't want to use it anymore. And that's true for digital participation and for offline participation as well. And that's why the approach that we're taking is what we call building infrastructure. And so what we do when we work with governments, we help them create internal capacities that are not connected to the political power, so that even if the governmental institution changes its setup, the city hall officials who work there and city clerks who work there continuously, they're the ones who own the process. So that's one of the things. And I think it's by far the most important part of making sure that the processes succeed. Because then once you have the infrastructure, a lot of small little things start falling into places. by default, once you set up this process, you have better communication between departments. And so the tool, for example, is used more extensively and easier, or more cohesive processes are being developed because there's a better understanding of what the tool is being used for, etc., etc. That also helps to bridge the barrier with the lack of trust, because oftentimes people don't trust the process because they don't trust the continuity. They don't understand what's going to happen once the process finishes. But if you establish an infrastructure that is sustainable, then people are more likely to participate. So I would say that's one of the main challenges, is that we need to divorce participation from political will and just make it a DNA of our governance processes.
Thank you very much, Katya. I really like your feedback on focusing on the infrastructures and also sharing those technique and knowledge with the officials working in the local government. So like making it really rooted in local government, so that will not make the digital democracy project influenced by political force. I think that's really a brilliant idea. So okay, so speaking of how to make great digital participation projects survive in the government, I have a question for Hao-Ting. And so you have shared with us your work, your very successful case in the Forest Bureau. I would like to ask you to share more about these cases, particularly your recipe when I would say accompanied these public servants and people who were not satisfied with the original website. How do you get the two group of people work together, especially they may have a conflict in the process, like the public servants might not be happy about their works are being criticized, but the people, the user might think that this is the project, the app is not working. They're really not happy. So how do you accompany the both of group of people and put them together to work? And in this process, so how you make how you apply digital tools to help.
Okay, so I wanted to address back to my last couple of slides, needs, alignments, and partnerships. So no matter what topics that bringing to us, that we were always starting from need. And then it's not only citizens' needs, but then also civil servants' needs, because then when they are especially building up a digital service, of course, they also have a lot of challenges within the government. So then we actually gather different needs from different stakeholders, including the citizens or the government officials. And then within these needs, we find a common grounds using a design thinking process. So no matter how much conflicts that they have, there's always something that they believe in together. So for example, I think nobody will disagree that they wanted to build up a friendly digital interface for applying hiking permits. And then this is the common grounds that they can focus on. So once finding out the alignments, then we design this process for them to discuss together what can be put it into details. And then we build up partnerships, because resources from the citizens is also very important. They can be part of it, they can give feedbacks, and more importantly, they need to know that their feedback is eventually coming into reality. So this is also very important, because nobody will want to see their participations being in vain, and then with no feedbacks from the government. So when they are doing this participations, they wanted to see the outcome, or they wanted to see their efforts being implemented into this process. So I would say no matter what processes that we have gone through or what topics that we are talking about, it's always about finding out needs and then finding alignments within those different stakeholders, and then building up partnerships together.
Thank you very much, Hao-Ting. I think that's really useful, very, very useful and practical suggestion for handling all kinds of discussions of decision making or public service. Thank you very much, Hao-Ting. Then following that, we have talked about a lot about how the government should have a strategy to apply digital tools and also make great projects survive in the government sectors. But now we are going to focusing more on the users and the people. So I have a question for Katya. So maybe advocates or practitioners, they finally found a really great tool by using the guide and rating matrix, and they're going to really apply it to the practical discussions. But they found out there might be not so many people in their community knowing this tool. And they found out there's not enough participants in the digital platforms, and the demographic and the diversity is since not sufficient. And if we encountered this kind of situation, from your experience of making this rating and guide, what are the reasons causing this problem, and what kinds of methods that we can apply to prevent this problem?
Thank you so much for this great question. As I said, accessibility is one of the key metrics, and oftentimes that is an issue to actually secure it. So first of all, I want to take a step back. Even before you choose a great platform, this is where it starts and kicks in. You really need to plan ahead in the way that you really, as Hao-Ting was talking about, you really need to understand who the people are, who your community is, who the target audience is, because that will also define how you can reach them. Because basic principle of participation, people meet people where they're at. And when you invite them to a new space, invite them through the avenues that are already using. If you're trying to invite young people who are using, I don't know, mostly Instagram and TikTok, but you are using LinkedIn, of course, they're not going to show up. Of course, you're going to be frustrated. So that's the very first step. You map and you understand your stakeholders and key audiences. You plan ahead how you're going to reach to them. The other thing, and I already talked about this, is it's essential to introduce hybrid mode to offset any disparities. It's not possible to create fully inclusive process that's going to be only online, because by default, some people are just not comfortable using it. They don't have access, and it's just good to have a different option for participation. So that's a very, again, counterintuitive suggestion for digital process. Have a non-digital part of it also planned and valuable. And finally, it's kind of connected to planning ahead, is providing additional support, as easy as it sounds, but different people have different levels of digital literacy. So for example, installing booths where people can come in and ask questions on how to register, or people can have voting stations that are digitalized and they have support of the people who can explain to them how to vote digitally. That's one of the things. One of the very interesting examples of increasing accessibility specifically for people with disabilities was in Glasgow, Scotland, where the PB process was co-managed and basically co-designed by the association working with people with disabilities. And as a part of the process, what they've done is they provided hardware for people who didn't have it. B, they provided special trainings on how to use it and how to operate the platform. And as I said, C, they also had separate booths in public spaces where people could go and just ask questions to get this information. So there are a lot of different ways to increase accessibility. But again, this is about educating and longer term investment in it. You need to really work with people and make sure they have this information beforehand.
Thank you, Katya, for providing so many practical suggestions. I think sometimes people, the government or the people who use the tool might really forget to educating and training people how to use this digital form. I think it's really a good idea to set up the booth, providing the training and or even a manual to teach people how to really use them. I think that's really wonderful suggestion. So, well, following the questions to Katya, I also have a question to Hao-Ting. So the similar questions, what is your recommendation to enhance the outreach of a digital tool? But particularly, you have mentioned that you know that very much on how to make people feel encouraged and satisfied when they use the digital tools. I think that's a very important point. So share more about that?
Yeah, thank you, Ya-wei. I want to echo what Kaya has mentioned, hybrid mode. It's also very important that we provide different channels. It's like what Kaya has mentioned, that you provide booths and then you provide different supports or help. And I wanted to share with you an example to reflect this question. It's the mask rationing system that we designed back in 2020. And then I know some of you, if you are in Taiwan, you are probably very familiar with this process. It's because when the COVID-19 started to strike the world, and Taiwan at that time is still not we don't have the outrage of the disease yet, but then we're panicked. So then we're looking for we're looking for the medical mask to buy, and then very soon people are lying in front of the pharmacies. And then we see this need, and then we immediately rolled out a digital platform where you can order the medical mask and then to send it to the convenience store of your choice. But then after launching this platform for a few days, we still see some of the people line up in front of the pharmacies. Who are they? Those are the ones who are not familiar with the technologies. They don't know how to use the digital platforms to order the mask. But then we don't want to neglect their needs. So then we very soon, in 2 or 3 days, launch another option where you can actually ordering in the kiosk in the convenience store with the help from the convenience store clerk. So then, even though that you don't know how to operate those systems, but then we facilitate a place for you. It's like what Kaya mentions, the booth, that you can get help. And then you don't have to line up in the pharmacies anymore, that we wanted to solve these problems. So then we provide different channels for different people in different needs. So then they can choose whatever they like or whatever they feel comfortable in using the services. And this is what I think echoing what Kaya has mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Hao-Ting. This is really very concrete sharing experience. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much for answering, provide very good answers to my questions. So, so now we will be open the floor to the audience to ask questions. Well, thank you, Katya, and also our audience helping me to do a lot of work that the host should do. You already helped me to answer their questions on the chat board. So I think I will just read the feedback for the questions that Katya raised in her presentations about. I remember it is how do you think about civic tech community, right?
It was a question on common challenges. Like, what's the common challenges with running digital participation? Yes.
Okay. So I saw some of the reply from the chat board. So problem A is people are reluctant to open up, and problem B is how to come to legitimate decisions as it is somewhat accidental who participate. So these are the problems that the audience thinks for the question. So could you do you have any opinions about this problems, Katya?
So I'll start. I'll be happy to hear if Hao-Ting has any other ideas, but my take basically on this is people are reluctant to open up because they don't really have the experience with it yet, and it's a question of trust. So it's a question of explaining to them how the process is gonna be structured and what to expect from it, but also, as it was mentioned before, it's also a matter of actually following up on doing what people choose to do, or on acting on the data that they provided. So building this trust is essential. You need to, so basically two little things. Explain to people how the data or how their activities and outputs are going to be used. B, actually follow up on it. This way, people are going to be more likely to engage later on. And the second problem with legitimate decisions as a somewhat accidental who participates, well, it is and it isn't accidental. There is a certain group of people who is more likely to participate online, and it's definitely worth tracking it so that you understand who is overrepresented. But then again, it's a matter of planning your process. And understanding who you're going to be inviting to offset this kind of disparity. And as I said before, sometimes it's about reaching out to people through different communication channels, or sometimes it's providing them with a different in-person space to actually participate. This way you can increase the quality of data and quality of inclusion, and therefore the quality of decision making.
Thank you, Katya. We would like to hear what your thought is, Hao-Ting. What do you think about these two problems of participation? Like people are reluctant. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to share my experiences with working with the civil servants. It's not only the civil servants, so when people are not familiar with the things that you wanted to introduce to them, they will always get nervous, or they will be reluctant of accepting to do it. So from our experiences in PDIS, that we demonstrate and then we show them how to do together with them. So then we actually partner up. That's why I mentioned in the presentation that we done nearly 100 collaborative meetings together with the civil servants, because we wanted to create opportunities for them to be more open, to be in this participation process. And this is the way that we actually introduce to them to the more that you do it, the more that you get familiar with it. And to answer the other questions about the representativeness in the digital participations, in collaborative meetings, that we actually believe in diversity more than the quantity. So then if you invite 100 people coming into this event, and then they're speaking out the same opinion, that in collaborative meetings, in our opinion, it counted as one participation. But then if you are 10 people sharing 10 different ideas, then we will write it in 10 different post-its. So then we collect diverse opinions rather than counting the quantities. So this is how we handle the questions that you bring it out.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hao-Ting, to provide a very concrete solution of other just the process of how do you evaluate each participant's opinion, how you weigh their voting. That's a very practical solution. Yeah. So okay. I think the most of the questions of the audience are being answered. So I will take the advantage as a host to keep asking the question from my side. So I have a question for Katya. You have done a great job of checking all the indicators of all the digital tools and platforms. I remember in the guide and the ratings, I think in the content it also mentioned that AI can somehow contribute to categorize or facilitate the process of collecting the ideas from the people. So but we can foresee that there is, of course, upside and downsides. So could you please share with us what's your perceptions and perspective on how AI can help us in the aspects of public participation, and what we have to keep in mind when we use AI for this?
Well, the use of AI and the AI in digital participation is in its infancy as a debate and a discussion. So the possibilities are yet to be explored, but there are already a few ideas that can immediately come to mind. One of them is that AI can serve as a personal assistant or expert to provide information and raise awareness to the participants. For example, when you enter a platform and you need to comment or deliberate on a specific topic, you can have AI as a basically guide that can help you understand information better, provide additional information, and basically work on request for whatever you need. It can also serve potentially as a facilitator of online discussions and processes. As I already said, it can help people or even groups working online and guiding them through the process to provide specific feedback. And another thing that could be quite useful and is also connected to the features I already talked about, it can help to increase transparency, for example, in public funds, and increased awareness about how the processes work. Because oftentimes when people operate and work on topics of public policy, they are oftentimes informed or sometimes they are not fully informed about every single piece of data that's out there. And AI can basically serve as an encyclopedia for people to immediately understand what different details, different types of data. And then also there are certain benefits on the side of the governments. AI can definitely help analyze bulks of data, including semantic and linguistic analysis that is very costly and very hard to do otherwise with human resources. Again, it can increase transparency, which is also beneficial for the government. It can increase accountability, and it can also help to offset some facilitation and engagement costs. However, all of it is great. We should not forget that AI is at the moment an imperfect tool that reproduces human biases and that can create further complications based on this. AI is built by people, and therefore the biases that we have, intentionally or unintentionally, are translated into it. So it still can influence the process, it still can create a biased process, and we just need to be aware of it and don't think of AI as a perfect solution that's going to create some sort of a universally great process. It still has to be guided by a person.
Thank you, Katya. That's very informative. So I saw the questions from the audience to Katya. She asked, is Ellie, she asked, when rating digital platforms for accessibility, does the score include whether a platform is compatible with screen readers, assistive technology? So Katya, could you provide your answer?
It's a great question. We raised it, but unfortunately it was not counted in the existing guides. That's one of the issues, though, that we want to work on and improve on. Definitely accessibility for people with limitations and disabilities. But at the moment, unfortunately, it's not. However, on People Powered website, there is a presentation that we've done as a part of the People Powered University on how to generally increase accessibility of processes, digital and in person, to people with disabilities. So that's kind of an information that can help you work on the accessibility issues.
Thank you, Katya. I also have following these questions. I think I would like to also ask Hao-Ting, from your experience in working in PDIS. So how if the people feel that for example, the Taiwan or joint platform, they're not satisfied with some part of it and they want to make it user friendly, and how the general public can help to improve it in a more constructive way. For example, sending emails or provide suggestions to PDIS. Can you please share with us?
So the e-petition platform right now is actually managed by the National Development Council, and we work closely with them, but then mostly on topics. More than on the interfaces. But then I do believe that they actually collect the feedbacks from the users, not only within the interfaces, but then within the process as well. So within the process of e-petitions, they might encounter some problems, or they will always, they will receive feedbacks from maybe emails, or even when they are in contacting with the let's say the proposers, and then that the proposers will give feedbacks to them as well. So I believe they do collect feedbacks, and then because in digital platforms or digital services, in a couple of years or every year, they will have the redesign, the chances of redesigning. So they collect all these feedbacks, and then probably will also do the prototyping sessions with the users. So I remember a couple of months ago that I also received their questionnaires about asking whether the process of this e-petition platform is good, or do you have any feedbacks? So then they do also proactively reaching out to ask feedbacks as well. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. So Hao-Ting, well, I have a follow-up question to you as well. So I think because I know that you have a designer background, so I think that somehow helps you to optimize the government's digital service. So from your perspective, if you want to keep optimizing government's digital service, what kind of resource the government should pour in, or what kind of talents with what kind of backgrounds that they should recruit, or how do they make the talents who supports this project more diverse? And I want to hear what's your thought about
that. I believe within the government, it's actually so. I have the privilege in PDIS to work in a very diverse team with researchers, and then with designers, with even filmmakers or reporters, and then we all have different, and of course we have engineers as well, and then we all have different focuses on when we are talking about a public topic or a policy design that we each can contribute in different subjects or different knowledges or different professions. So, but then if I have to pick one, that in my opinion, of course, I do believe design thinking is helping the government to gather a lot of insights and then to analyze users' needs. So whatever that is focusing on human-centered, that is very, very important. And I'm not saying only the designers is doing the human-centered. I do believe there are a lot of different, because I also read Katya's work, and then you guys are also doing, and I'm a human-centered process. So what I believe is that any fields that is related to human-centered, and then to helping to gather insights, and then to analyze, to help to find a common grounds, that those talents are very, very welcome in the government.
Thank you very much, Hao-Ting. So now since I didn't see more questions from the audience, so I will ask the final questions, and the question is for both of you. So now if a person is with zero knowledge background about digital tools, digital democracy, deliberative democracy, anything, but he really wants to initiate a discussion in his or her community, for because the one wants to make the decision making and discussions of a policy really democratic and participatory. and the one really wants to know what kind of digital tool or what kind of resource that he can apply. So what will be one or two suggestions to this person? So I think let's start from Katya.
So if I have to think of just a few ideas, and I keep on repeating this and I can't repeat it enough, I guess, is plan ahead and plan the whole process right away, so that you understand what exactly the process is going to look like. And based on this, identify the needs that you might have and requirements that you might have for a participation tool. Because one of the things that I've seen happening a lot is people first getting the tool and then trying to fit the process into it, which creates a problem of the process actually not being relevant to what the needs are. And then the whole participation fails, and there's a lot of disappointment on every single side. People are disappointed in the process and the tool. The government is disappointed in people in the process, and the civic tech solution is just like, okay, well, I guess we're not relevant. So in order to understand it, that's, I think, one very important thing that I want everyone to do is plan your whole process first and choose the tool after. It seems very basic, but trust me, that happened a lot, and I've seen it ruining very great processes. So yeah, that would be my first and probably most important thing to share.
Thank you. Okay, Hao-Ting, please.
No. I just wanted to echo what Kaya has mentioned. I also wanted to bring everybody back to what some of my slides has mentioned. The needs are very important. So it's not about what tools that you use, but then it's the needs that what kind of needs that's generated from this topic and what kind of purpose that you wanted to achieve. So these are always prioritized rather than choosing what kind of tools that you use. Sometimes using paper and pen is much more easier than doing an online mind mapping. So sometimes I recall it back into Kaya's presentation, doing more with less. It's actually something that we believe in as well. So you don't want to focus your processes with what you are using, but then more than what you want to achieve and what are the needs from the stakeholders. So these are much more important than choosing the tools.
Thank you very much, Hao-Ting. That is also very, very great point. Yeah, I think if I'm the one who with the zero knowledge, I will be very, very appreciate all of your feedback very much. So we also see some feedback to these questions from the audience. I think Ms. Lin sharing that maybe sometimes the point is not about technology, it's about how to find the target people and make the discussions more better quality. Yeah, I think this is very important as well to reach the target audience, and that can really help you to achieve the goal. Okay, so I think this will be the end of the discussion today. Thank you very much, Hao-Ting and Katya, for providing us such really precious experience. And thank you for all the audience to share your perspective and questions in the chat board. I think Katya already answered many of your questions. And if you have more questions, please feel free to write an email to me. And I will do the best to share what I know to you. Okay, so thanks again, and I hope to see you all in the next Innovation for Democracy Café. Please stay tuned to Click-Edelman Foundation's Global Innovation Hub website and Facebook. Okay, I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. See ya.
Thank
Bye.
you.